What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the SRD, the System Reference Document, specifically SRD 5.2. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this, you might have missed out everything that was going on back in the OGL timeframe. But long story short, the System Reference Document, in summation, is a document that allows you to create content in the world of Dungeons and Dragons in a safe way that will not make you liable to copyright infringement or get cease and desist or sued from Wizards of the Coast, because the information contained within that document is free for you to use. Now, originally, this came in the form of the open game license. As we know, there was issues with that, and ultimately where we landed was the System Reference Document 5.1 was put into Creative Commons, which means no one entity owns it, so therefore we are safe to use that in perpetuity going forward. Now, again, this is only for those of you who want to create content in the form of monetization. If you want to create content and release it for free on the internet, you have no issue there. If you want to create content and release it via the DMs Guild, that's fine too, because that has its own series of things you get into when you go work with the DMs Guild. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is back in May of 2024, we had heard about this update to the SRD called the SRD 5.2. And as many of you know, 2024 D&D has officially rolled out in its entirety, with the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual just coming out back in February. Now, the reason I bring this up is because technically, unless you have some sort of pre-existing or current existing deal with Wizards of the Coast, maybe through how you release things on D&D Beyond, you technically cannot create content utilizing aspects of 2024 D&D for sale. Now, a lot of what's in 2024 D&D was also in 2014 D&D, so there's like loopholes and ways you can kind of move around within that. But let's say you want to make a cleric subclass, right? And there's the new way divine intervention is handled. There's those couple of new options where the clerics get to choose at level 1, do you want to be more of a casty cleric or more of a martial cleric, right? And you make that decision at level 1, and all of the framework and wording of that you would be able to use in its entirety were the SRD 5.2 released. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is we heard from Wizards of the Coast last May that the SRD 5.2 would be released, quote, within weeks of the Monster Manual releasing. Now, technically, within weeks is extremely ambiguous time frame. It currently is within weeks of the Monster Manual. Going forward, any amount of time is in an amount of weeks. But when you say within weeks, it kind of provokes a certain opportunity or outcome rather in your mind. Whereas if you said within months or within the year, okay, that gives me an idea. It can come out anytime before December, or it'll come out several months later. Well, we're a month post the release of the Monster Manual. And if you're wondering what I'm referencing, it is this article that came out here back in May of 2024. And it says, obviously, back then, the team was hard at work. And it says, in 2016, 2 years after the debut of D&D 5e, we released the SRD 5.1. We're proud to report that SRD 5.2 will be released within weeks of the release of the 2025 Monster Manual. Again, technically, we're just a little bit over a month, but when you say within weeks, it makes it feel to me like it's a short time frame. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. What do you think? What is within weeks? What's like the range you give? I'd say weeks, we're obviously talking plural, so 2 weeks is the minimum. I think you go 8 weeks is about as far as I start to consider it not to be, quote, within weeks anymore. When we're getting into the 3-month time frame, I feel like we've extended past what I could consider feasibly within weeks. But I'm curious what that constitutes for all of you. All right, so it says what's going to be in the SRD 5.2. It'll be an update to the SRD 5.1 with all the content from 2024. It's a massive update. It will provide revised rules of the same scope as 5.1. Creators will have the tools they need to create content using the revised and expanded rule set. It won't include lore references. It never did. For that, you need to use the DM's Guild. And that's sort of the trade-off you have if you want to create things using the lore of the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, which was never covered in the SRD. You would put it out on DM's Guild, and then you follow under like the DM's Guild contract and the revenue sharing and thing that you do with, and whatever aspects are tied to the DM's Guild. Whereas if you're making something purely using the SRD, you can do that and make a Kickstarter and sell, whatever the product is. And as long as you fall within the confines of that SRD, which basically what it's going to give you is what you fundamentally need to know how to do things. So it'll give you an example of a background, an example of feats, the concept that we have epic boons, origin feats, generic feats. It'll also give you like every base class, right? So that's everything in the player's handbook, and then an example of a subclass, just so you have a framework of how subclasses are for each one of those classes. A large portion of spells, equipment, and so on. Not everything is obviously not going to give you spells that have lore-based names. Like you're not going to get Leomin's Tiny Hut, but you might get Tiny Hut, things like that. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about how Creative Commons is basically, this was the best thing we could have happened because it's no longer in WotC's hands. It's in, its own kind of publicly. And it says, when the SRD 5.2 comes out, will I still have access to 5.1? The answer to that is yes. And then they go on to state why wait to do that release. And the concept is for balancing purposes, which I think is funny that they said this here, but they still did a staggered release of the books. And as many of you know who started transitioning to 2024 before the monster manual came out, you were fighting 2014 monsters with 2024 characters, and you could basically, rules as written, steamroll things. Thankfully, the monsters have sort of evened that out a little bit. But I understand their concept of not wanting to piecemeal updates to the SRD 5.2 and just rolling it out all at once. And they said it's called the 5.2 because it encompasses the entirety of the 5th edition rule set and then just updates it as opposed to something wholly new. It will be localized to the languages they currently support. And then something that was asked a lot during the OGL timeframe and shortly afterwards, what about SRDs for previous editions? This would be for things like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 3.5, and 4th edition. And they said, we still need to complete reviews on those material before they're released into Creative Commons. We made the decision to wait until after the 2024 rules revision were released to begin reviews of those documents. So I would not expect anything for older editions until we get the SRD 5.2 in its full release. But this is in concept to say, hey, while licenses do exist, the SRD for 3rd edition is out there. It technically still falls under the open game license when the open game license was originally created back in 3rd edition. But that's subject to the whim of Wizards of the Coast if they want to get rid of it or whatever they want to do. So dumping those SRDs into Creative Commons removes that as an option for them going forward. So I would love to see that happen. I don't know how many people are out there trying to create and sell content on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th edition, but I'd like to have that as an opportunity if I wanted to, or if other folks want to do that, you have the capability to do so. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring this up because we haven't heard a single thing. I know GaryCon was like last weekend, and I don't know, Wizards of the Coast usually has a presence there to some degree, but I don't think anything came out in the form of major announcements about the time frame of SRD 5.2. I've heard some like rumblings through the grapevine that it's in process or something, but I have nothing concrete to go off at this point. It has been, again, over a month since the Monster Manual released. I still feel like we're falling within the within weeks time frame. But given some of the stuff that's happened lately with a bunch of the layoffs, the shuttering of Project Sigil and things, folks are probably going to start to get a little worried. Is this coming? Now, I'm not saying that this is doom and gloom or subterfuge or it was done on purpose and we were told one thing and then we're not going to get it. I don't feel like it's that way. They're a large company. It takes a long time to get a single cog to turn in a big company. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's basically what it is there's just haven't gotten a chance to get to it, or it's in process. Maybe it's on some sort of chain of reviews that needs to go through so many people before it can be released to the public. But the sooner you release this, the better it's going to be for everybody. You're going to stop having people start going, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, guys. It's been so long. So, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.